Welcome to the Voice of Change, where advocacy meets action. I'm your host, Linda, a dedicated community leader, a voice for the voiceless. Join me as we explore the stories and strategies that shape our global and local communities and inspire positive change. Be sure to follow me at Linda Advocate on Instagram and follow my blog at the Times of Israel, where my articles call to action, encouraging readers to actively participate in change. I am so excited to introduce today's guest. It is such a privilege to introduce Rabbi Simon Jacobson, author of Towards a Meaningful Life. Rabbi Jacobson is also the publisher of the weekly Allgemeiner Journal. Rabbi, I don't know if you recall, but we just met before COVID hit at a closed door meeting in Crown Heights with a handful of community leaders, and then again more recently at your gala, which was spectacular. Does the rabbi recall?
Absolutely. Of course, I
Oh,
remember. Meeting you is a memorable experience. So, yes, I
thank
do
you.
remember.
Thank you.
Thank you
Rabbi,
for having me. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you for
it's
having me.
our privilege, Rabbi. Rabbi, I must share with you that ever since I picked up the book Towards a Meaningful Life, I think it was at about 1995, I actually turned to it for guidance and inspiration almost every day since that day. And so it's super fitting that when my Instagram community turned to me for advice, which is above my pay grade, that I pick up the phone and ask the rabbi to be with us today.
Well,
Um, yeah,
it's my honor, and I'm humbled to be with you. You're doing a great job, so feel secure and confident. We'll have a great interview here.
thank you, Rabbi. So many people, Rabbi, including myself, are deeply troubled over the October 7th tragedies and, of course, the ongoing hostage crisis in Gaza. The thing is, people feel very tormented from what I'm being told by the unknowns of the treatment of our brothers and sisters. And this uncertainty casts like a shadow of guilt inducing when it comes to like everyday pleasures like simple cup of coffee or dessert or listening to music. How are we supposed to react to what's going on as Jews? How are we supposed to live our life knowing this is happening?
Well, I think you captured it quite accurately. It's I believe, a sentiment, a feeling we all share. First, the shock. Everybody remembers exactly where they were that morning, Shmini Atzeret, October 7th. And as the news started coming in, got worse and worse. And the shock, I think, is still there with us. Just the sheer numbers and the sheer brutality of the atrocities perpetrated. And in many ways, it's like shattered the invincibility, so to speak, that we felt Jews had, especially in Israel. And then, as you said, the continuing crisis with the hostages, young children, men and women taken hostage by people who are savages. Let's be honest, that's what they are. So how could it not shake us up? So I just want to firstly validate those feelings. I don't believe that the way to go is say, because of faith and trust and betachon in Hashem, that does not mean we're not aware of these terrible, terrible calamities, and it shakes us all up. So it's important to know that in Judaism, we are not afraid of being shaken up. We've seen many, many terrible things in our history. But then comes the second side of the question. Okay, we're sensitive, we're aware, we're not being oblivious. We know that any one of us as a Jew, wherever you are in the world, would have been a target. And we are targets. So it's not just about them. It's not like, okay, the Jews in the United States or other parts of the world are thousands of miles away. We're all part of one tragedy here, one challenge. But at the same time, what was so unique about the Jewish people throughout history, and as well as now, in a very ironic way, it brings out some of our deeper strengths. I mean, the only way I could put it is that Jews are like a tea bag. You don't know how strong they are until you put them into hot water. I mean, look at the nobility, the generosity, the charity, the volunteerism. I mean, it's like there's an expression, Mi ka'amchi Yisrael go echad ba'aretz. Who is a nation like the Jews? Instead of being bitter and cowering in fear, look at the IDF, look at the Tzahal. Look at the enthusiasm, the messages they send out, the songs they sing, the Shabbat Shalom. So that doesn't minimize the shock and the uncertainties, as you put it, but it does show us that we have another side to us, which is extremely strong. And frankly, the best way to deal with shock, with uncertainty, with all the unknowns of disruption that comes through all that has happened, is to be better people, to be stronger and more light to counter the darkness. So as demonic as their hatred is, the demonic passion of their hatred, we have to have even more passion in our love for each other. And in a strange way, when we show that, that counters the negative forces. So the end of the day is these feelings of grief, these feelings of unknown has to be harnessed into some type of positive actions that we're seeing and we should see much more of. I don't have a better way. That's the proven method that Jews have always employed to get through the hardest times.
So the rabbi is saying that we should focus on chesed and doing more good and just being Jewish and proud of it. But what about just like, having like the ability to listen to music or to, enjoy a cup of coffee? People feel guilty with that because of what's going on. Is that wrong? Should we be like staving off those like not luxuries, but that's what it feels like when we think of our brothers in Gaza?
I think we have to distinguish between, as you put it, luxuries and necessities. Like, for example, should we not take care of our health and our daily responsibilities? Obviously, we have families, we have work, and we have to go through that. But I do think it's not a time for indulging now in long vacations or just lounging somewhere and on a beach. I think it's a serious time. It's not business as usual. So no, I would think of it this way. Let me put it to you this way. I think we're all at war. When you're mobilized and drafted into the military, everybody has their role to play. Not everyone's fighting on the front line. Some are fighting through raising money for the soldiers. Some are fighting through learning Torah. Some are fighting through the media and information war that's out there and the propaganda. But you have to feel a sense of urgency. You have to wake up in the morning and jump out of bed and say, I'm not going to sleep extra. It's not another day. There is a war. So I think it's a war mode that we need to pull ourselves into. When I say war, I mean to say urgency, not to be complacent. I think that's the way to go. To have a cup of coffee, have your cup of coffee. The soldiers on the front lines are also drinking coffee. But at the same time, they know they're at battle. So I think it's about just an overall sense that it's not business as usual, a sense of urgency, a sense of immediacy, a sense that you are part of the battle, that you're not a bystander or an observer, that you are part of it. And wherever you are in the world, you need to be doing something more intense, more passionate, as if you were in the military itself. So be it. Let it be the spiritual military, the psychological battles. But a sense of urgency, to me, that's the key. And yes, I don't think overindulgence is wise at a time like this.
I hear that. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Thank you, Rabbi. In light of the global favoritism for those who perpetuated the atrocities of October 7th, I believe it reflects a broader struggle against profound evil. How should we as Jews interpret and respond to this?
Well, look, when things are going in calm times, when things are going well, we usually, unfortunately, can lose sight, and our value system and our standards sometimes get dulled or even blurred. One thing that this does, the events that are happening, it crystallizes very clearly what you stand for, what is good, what is evil, what is right, what is wrong. And so the first thing, I don't want to say we have to thank our enemies for that, but that's what happened. When you start seeing anti-Semitism emerging and other global discrimination and attitude to Jews, you start seeing who is who. There's no more of that ambiguity. So I think as Jews, this is a time for us to rise to the occasion. Because at the end of the day, it's the Jewish people that brought morality and brought ethics and brought civilization to the world. So I stand very proud as a Jew today and say, you know what? We come from Abraham of the Bible. He taught us what it means to be chesed, what's kindness, What is justice? As a matter of fact, a month or two ago, I did a video targeting, actually, I targeted and I spoke to our Muslim cousins and friends. What would your great-grandfather Abraham say? So I think as Jews, we have to be a beacon of light, a living example, and saying, you want to know what real goodness is? Here's goodness. Because with all the justifications back and forth, the bottom line is certain lines should never be crossed. What Hamas did is of the worst possible. You have grievances, there are ways to air your grievances. So to me, I see this as a tremendous wake-up call and an ability to crystallize. What do you stand for? I speak to many secular audiences. I say, this is a time, what do you stand for? What do you consider to be something you're ready to fight for?
Right. Well, touching on that point, I mean, the one positive outcome of the tragedy of October 7th, if you can say it, is that the continuous war has brought clarity as to clearly see the Jew haters, as you've mentioned, and the darkness revealing. And the fact is that now we see clearly all this anti-Semitism, like the ripping down of posters of children, the universities, the anti-Semitism that unfortunately has been rampant for so many years. But how should we react to that? I mean, of course, we're trying to punish those and those that have been perpetuating this, and some people are losing their jobs. What in a spiritual way would you say is the answer, though?
Yeah. So, remember, we learned from Yaakov, from the Bible, from Jacob, that when he prepared to deal with his brother, Esav, he prepared on all fronts. He prayed to Hashem, to God. He prepared a bribe to appease his brother, and he prepared for war, which means we have to cover all fronts. I think, number one, we must know that we have to eradicate our enemy, because if not, they'll do this again. Right. And this is simply not because we want to, not because we like war, but simply it's pure self-defense. So I think it's critical to understand that we don't just turn the other cheek. You're dealing here with real enemies who have hostages, who have been proven to be bloodthirsty, especially when it comes to Jews, and we have to do what we have to do. But here's the key thing to remember. We are not defined by being warriors against our enemies. We're defined by what we fight for. We fight for a better world. We fight for goodness. So the ultimate response is not just to eliminate the enemy, to eliminate the anti-Semitic presidents at the different universities. That's on the immediate level. That's like going into the emergency room just to stop the bleeding. What we want to do is come out with something much stronger and say, here's a living example of what a human being should be like. We have to show a shining example of what it means to be human, especially in contrast to what's going on. So I think that to me is the ultimate. It's like saying we're not just fighting darkness, we're bringing light to dispel the darkness. So I think the answer to that question is really, that's what we need to. So Jews have to be more Jewish than ever, have to be more human than ever, more menschlich, more sensitive, more kind, more compassionate. Now I know some will say, how do you reconcile that with going to war? That's why war is fought, because you have to fight war, but that doesn't define who you are. We're not people who are warriors. We fight war because it was forced upon us. We are people who are ambassadors of light. And I think today you see the wake-up call. Jews everywhere are coming out of the woodwork. This one wants a mezuzah, tzitzit, tefillin, lighting a Shabbos candle. I think we need to use this as an opportunity to get the Jewish people to rise and say, it's never been more important for you to be Jewish, because this is exactly, the world wants to know, why is Israel so important? Why Jews are so important? Let us show them, because we brought God to this world. We brought the virtues and the values that God wants all of us to live by.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, that reminds me of a mantra that's going on right now. People are saying, the more you hate on us, the more Jewish we will get. And that's exactly, I guess, what the rabbi is saying. Rabbi, did the Rebbe predict any of the current global challenges? Are there any instructions or guidance that he left that would be relevant, especially regarding, I believe he made a statement about the possibilities of a Holocaust happening in America. Is that correct?
That's somewhat, I am not, that's, It's a little dubious, the sources of that. I don't know if they ever said that, to be very honest, about the Holocaust. But he definitely made plenty of statements. And this is what he said. I'll tell you. He spoke about it during the 6-Day War, Yom Kippur War, the Lebanon War, the many different challenges Israel faced. The Rebbe's view was exactly what we're talking about. There's number one is you have to deal with your enemy with strength. You don't negotiate with a sworn enemy that's calling for your annihilation. You need to demonstrate strength. That's the only way. Peace through strength. The goal is peace. I personally remember the Lubavitcher Rebbe saying a number of times that if you do what you have to do out of strength, it would also save not just Jewish lives, it will save Arab and Muslim lives. Because at the end of the day, peace is good for everybody. Look, let's be very blunt and honest here. It is Hamas that has taken 2 million Gazan Muslims hostage, their own people. They've created a war zone. They've created a whole infrastructure of death and essentially using 2 million of their own people as human shields just to do one thing, to try to kill Israel, to try to kill Jews. That is the greatest crime ever. That is the crime. Okay, so the fact of the matter is that we need to understand what that means and not buy into any other narrative. And as a result of that, we need to be able to really demonstrate to the world what we stand for. And what we stand for is peace. We want a peaceful world. If somebody doesn't want peace, they've written their own script. So It's not that we're looking for war. We're not looking for retribution. We're looking for peace. If Hamas surrendered right now, unconditional surrender, what do you think would happen?
Peace.
Everything would end.
I mean, the fact is, though, I hear what you're saying about the Palestinians. They do live under a jackboot to a certain degree, but apparently there was a poll that just ran a couple of days ago that if Hamas were to run, they would win again. They would win. So that means that these people, these supposed innocent civilians who do live under a jackboot, would vote them in again. That's not okay, considering what happened after October 7th. So how do you speak to that?
Well, let's take World War II as an example. There are 100 million Germans. I'm not going to say everyone was a Nazi, but the bottom line is the Nazis took control. Therefore, all the Germans were complicit, and many of them supported the Nazis directly, maybe indirectly. And you know what? You had to go to war and completely destroy Germany, unconditional surrender, and then change their whole system, their education system. Today, Germany is an ally of the United States, an ally of Israel's. And I think the same case. I totally agree with you. I didn't call them innocent civilians. Because right now, as we speak, the Arab Muslim children are being taught to hate Jews. So what do you think is going to happen from a little child being taught to hate when they grow into adults? So the war really is going to only be won, not when you just eradicate the enemy, is when you re-educate these children and that you bring a whole new climate into the next generation. I agree, it's a tremendous problem. But I want to go back to what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said that the best preemptive medicine was don't wait. I mean, it's sad to say this, but had this been nipped in the bud years ago and never allowed these tunnels to be built, never allowed their infrastructure to be built, we wouldn't have most of these problems. So the Rebbe, as a visionary as he was, understood, unfortunately, the implications of really ignoring the issue. And this all should have been done 20 years ago, to be honest, 30 years ago, whenever. I mean, now it's a cancer.
Not spiritually, politically speaking, just because you touched upon the tunnels. I mean, the administration must have seen the cement, the stuff that was coming in, that they were building these tunnels. How did they allow this to happen? And why did they allow this to happen to get to the point that it is today? What do you think?
I can't speak for them. I have no idea. I don't know. Was it overconfidence? Was it arrogance? Was it denial? Did they? I can't understand. It's billions of dollars of infrastructure. We're not talking about, you said cement. Yeah. I mean, they built a whole subway system.
Miles.
I cannot understand it. I just hope the lesson has been learned that when you have a sworn enemy, maybe they put their guard down. They thought Hamas was becoming peaceful in their own minds. And unfortunately, we were reminded October 7th very rudely of what's really going on. I don't have a way to explain it. I don't understand it. To me, the only thing I could say is somewhat like the Jews in Germany. You sometimes let your guard down because you hope for the best. You hope
Right.
that the enemy will never do what they did. And now we've been awoken and seen the facts of life. Yes, they should never have allowed it to be built in the first place. They should have allowed, you know what? If they should have built Gaza into Dubai or something like that. Had they used all those billions of dollars to build
They could.
beautiful,
Yeah.
beautiful oceanfront cafes, a place for tourists to come, they could have done that. I don't know. Now we learned the hard way, and look what had to happen. Look how many lives have to be lost. So the Rebbe was trying to preempt all that by saying, "Be wise. An enemy's an enemy until proven otherwise." They declared war against Israel. Don't
Oh
ever
yeah.
put your guard down when an enemy is calling for your destruction, and that could have saved many lives. Now I hope the lesson is learned, and we can start a new chapter as quickly as possible.
Right. The rabbi mentioned the children and the pervasive hate. And I don't know if you saw recently Mia, I think her last name is Shem, the girl who was interviewed, who was in captivity. She was saying that when she was in captivity in a house, she was starving. They literally were starving her. And the kids would come in with a bag of candies, open it in front of her to tease her, and then close the bag and leave laughing. I mean, that is just pure evil. I can't even comprehend that. I have children, and to our worst enemy, we would not do that. We would not do that. We can't see suffering. So, the hate is just, it's beyond the culture of hate that they created. Like you said, it's bottle fed. But, Rabbi, speaking about hate, the global atrocities like the plight of Uyghurs in China is silence compared to the vocal response when it's aligned with hating the Jews and what's going on today. Why is that? What is it like? What is it that we're doing wrong? Because on a global level, Israel has been there for every country when they've had a crisis, and yet no one is speaking up now. What
We're
do you
doing
make of
nothing.
that?
We should not look at ourselves. It's not our fault. We're not, we're not perfect, but to blame ourselves, that has been a big mistake that Jews have made over history. They said, "Oh, we must have done this wrong. If we did this differently, they would love us." It's just like in psychology. When you have an abusive family member or abusive person, don't blame yourself for their abusive behavior. They want you to blame yourself. That's like
Right.
being a victim. There's nothing to blame ourselves. When they decided to create blood libels, that Jews were drinking the blood of Christian children with their matzah and Passover. Everyone knows how ludicrous that is. First of all, I
Even,
mean, I don't even have to explain. So
yeah.
there is a irrational, built-in hatred. I'll explain it. I gave a talk about this a while back. I think it goes back all the way to the time of the Bible. Jews always represented a nonconformity, always represented they were the God's witnesses. They were representative of a higher order of morality. And I think that the nations of the world were always threatened by that. Haman was threatened when Mordecai would not bow to him, and Pharaoh was threatened when the Jews were independent. They don't like independence. People want you to conform. They want you to worship them. The kings and monarchs of old could not get the Jews to worship them. And to me, I think they built up a deep hatred within. On a more cosmic or spiritual level, I think it's a hatred of the material world to the spiritual world. I'm not suggesting there aren't spiritual non-Jews, and not suggesting that all Jews are spiritual, but there's a certain, I would say, like the conscience of the world. The Jews have always been what they call the miner's canary. You always see when there's sadism, when there's destruction, it always begins by attacking the Jews, and then it attacks everyone else. Hitler didn't stop with the Jews.
Yeah.
So the Jews are like this lightning rod for enemies. And I think it goes into deeper cosmic and spiritual reasons, but there's also psychological ones. We're a successful minority, and that is really irks people. And now I think decent thinking people respect Jews and
Right.
actually love Jews, and they should admire us
They
and
exist.
respect us for what we brought to the world. but I could see many people, especially those that are failing and so on. Like, seeing the success of the Jews, seeing, like, what do they want from this little country called Israel? A small country. It's not even like a blip on the map compared to the whole region. But there's something about the Jewish people that stands out, that has always bothered the Romans and the Greeks and the Babylonians and the Persians and the Assyrians and the Egyptians and the Spanish. I mean, we've always been there. But the good news is we have always prevailed. And we are here today, and they're all the dustbin of history.
Right, Mezrat Hashem. So, Rabbi, I'm going to pivot to a more positive story. The word is that the rabbi is the spiritual advisor to the new Argentinian President Javier Milei. Can the rabbi share insights on how that journey came to be? I think it's so fascinating.
Yeah. Well, it was exactly September 10th, this past year, right before Rosh Hashanah, that I was introduced to he was a candidate for presidency, but he was an underdog. Javier Milei was the candidate, and I was introduced to him in New York. They felt that we would, I should communicate with him. People felt that I'd be good to communicate with him a vision, the Jewish vision. They knew he liked Judaism, he liked Torah.
Wow.
So I met him, and I presented my book, Toward a Meaningful Life, that you mentioned, in Spanish. Sure. I presented it to him, and to his sister, for that matter.
Oh.
And he was so taken. I remember him looking at me, his eyes were sparkling when I was sharing with him what I did over the years. In the time when the Lubavitcher Rebbe was alive, my job was to memorize hours and hours of the Rebbe's talks.
Oh,
and
wow.
Then repeated verbatim after Shabbat and after the holidays. So wow. I shared that with him. And I remember him looking at me, like saying, wow. I saw he was like, even though he's Catholic, to me, he looked like a Hasidic Jew who was so taken by that. And we just hit it off. There was some instinct he has about something that resonated with him. So that was that. Then a week later, someone sends me a clip from major television interview with him in Argentina in Spanish. And he's speaking about me and about his meeting with me and the book and what I did. So, but then a few months passed. The next thing I know, in November, I'm told that he won the election. He's the president.
Amazing.
Despite all odds, he won the election. So since I do ongoing videos, I decided to record a video, which I put on YouTube, just for the public, congratulating the new president. He should be successful. I shared some thoughts. I shared some thoughts about our meeting, about what does it mean to be a leader. A leader is not just a political leader; he's also a spiritual leader, to give people hope and direction and guidance and a certain sense of purpose. And I shared that. And the next thing I know, I get a phone call from one of his assistants that says to me, the president is sitting with me watching your video and he's crying.
Wow.
And he wants to talk to you. Okay. So he couldn't speak right then. Then one right after Shabbos, after he was elected, I get a phone call from him. And he says to me, thank you so much for your words. I'm so honored to meet you. And it's like he was just gushing. Then he told me he's coming Monday to New York. He's going to visit the Ohel of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, and would I meet him? He'd like to meet with me. So, of course, I met him Monday morning. We spent almost 4 hours together in a house. Then I escorted him with a few others to the Ohel, and then he went off to Washington. And we became, you said, a spiritual mentor. He sees me as a guide, as a teacher. And we've been in touch several times since. I will be seeing him soon.
You will? Is that what you said?
I'll be going to Argentina. I'll be visiting him.
I can understand a Frum Jew going to the Ohel first before, going to see politicians. But the president of Argentina going to the Ohel first, I'm baffled by the kind of love that he has for Judaism and for, I guess, Hasidic philosophy. Where does that stem from? Does the rabbi know?
I don't know. I don't know if he has Jewish DNA, but he seems to have very powerful instincts. Like in his words, he would say, look, if I became a leader of a country, so I want to go learn from the best leaders there are. Who are the leaders? Abraham, Moses, the Rebbe, people he sees the Rebbe as a paragon of leadership, of not just administrative leadership, like spiritual leadership, to give his people a vision. He identifies with that very strongly. I'm not sure where it comes from. When my meeting with him, he just seems to have very healthy instincts. Things resonate. He's a certain sense. He has a sense that this is the right, like the truths of life that he's discovering in Jewish thought. I think he identifies with the universal truths of morality, of God sending us to this world for a purpose. That's what my take on it.
Well, he sounds like he has a strong moral compass, and that's something that we're lacking in America with our leaders. What insights can the rabbi provide about the president, his character, his goals, his relationship vis-a-vis Israel and the Jewish people? Do you have any extra information you can give us?
Sure. I mean, whatever I can share with you, I could share with you. I will say the following. First of all, his attitude to Jews in Israel is unequivocal support. He just knows who's right and who's wrong. He knows a very, as you put it, moral compass, very strong moral compass. Look, he has a battle to fight, political battle. He's in a country that is a very wealthy country, but become very corrupt. I think,
Right.
Rates of inflation of 160%, 170%. So I can imagine it's an uphill battle because he has to fight the powers that be, people who like the status quo. So I don't envy him in that sense. But I think I spoke on Argentinian radio, the largest radio, right after he was elected. They had an interview with me. They made an exception. They usually only have Spanish speakers, but because they saw me as like a spiritual mentor of his, they interviewed me in English. And they asked me, what's your message to the Argentinian people? I said, you have a president that God chose, and support him. Give him a chance. And together, create a type of like vision for Argentina, a vision for the world, because we need that more than ever. And a few of the people in the radio station told me afterwards they were all crying. They were all very touched by that. So I think he's a real mensch. He's got a real heart and soul, and his head is definitely in the right place. He's not as crazy as some people make him. He's not at all that way. Very humble. When I sat with him, he didn't talk about himself. He wasn't bragging. He listened like a student. If you were there, no ears about him, you would not know he's a president. Very, very simple, austere, very, very, very humble person. So I see he has the qualities that can really bring greatness, because he's not arrogant. He's not loud. He's not like it's all about me, me, me. It's just a very sense of, I think, a real personality. But again, let's not be naive. He has challenges, like politics is dirty. It's not easy. But I hope to be able to help him strengthen his spiritual perspective, because when you're spiritually strong and you're committed to your moral vision, you get through most of the challenges of life. And I think he has that combination.
Well, so what I get from this is that we have to pray for his safety, because there's corruption, and we have to pray for him. And I also almost see this, and tell me if the rabbi sees this as well, as a God wink. Like God saying, I have your back. He installed this good person, and God willing, this might be the trajectory that we'll be going in from this point forward, not just in Argentina, but perhaps in America soon and other places as well. Do you feel like it's a God wink?
Absolutely. I said that to him a number of times. There's an expression in the hearts of leaders and kings is in the hands of God. God appoints leaders. And it's not a coincidence. He repeated this, by the way, in his inaugural address, what he heard from me. It's not an accident that he became leader right in this time of crisis in the Middle East. Because with all the ambiguity, with all the confusion, with all the propaganda, misinformation, he has a clear moral vision. And I personally think when he speaks, the whole world can listen to him. So I think it's definitely God sent. And that in addition to whatever he has to do in Argentina, he can provide a voice of clarity and of, you see all this, everyone wishy-washy, when you saw the presidents of the different universities, and as you said, leaders that are not really taking any stand. He is a man that's ready to take a stand. How could that not be God sent?
Exactly. So Rabbi, I heard that he had wanted to convert. Is that true to Judaism?
I also heard that when I didn't, he didn't tell me anything, but what I
Okay.
saw, I think he's a practical guy. He said, even if I would consider, I wouldn't consider it till after being president because it would make Shabbos too confusing.
I hear that. Rabbi, before I let the rabbi go, I must ask the rabbi, there are a lot of people, because of wickedness that seems to be ascending, believe that perhaps it's the times of Mashiach, that the end of times are coming. Can you speak to that?
Absolutely. I totally feel that way. I feel, and I also quote my great master and teacher, the Rebbe himself, after all that we've gone through, and we're talking about almost 2,000 years since the destruction of the Second Temple by the Romans, it's very clear from many signs that we're on the verge of we'll call it a new spiritual order, a spiritual revolution. And these are like birth pangs. These are the last gasps of an old world order. And the book of Daniel says that at the end of days, there'll be clarity. We talked before about clarity. You know, it will be clear what's right, what's wrong, who's your friend, who's your enemy. And there'll also be many advances. I mean, after all that's going on in Israel and in Gaza, which without minimizing it, let's not kid ourselves. Here we are speaking about this freely on the airwaves. Jews are experiencing a freedom unprecedented in history. We could educate our children as we see fit. We're successful. There's prosperity. Again, I'm not taking away from what's going on in Israel and God forbid the tragic losses and right now the people in danger and so on. But we can't also forget the progress that we've made and the blessings we have in our lives, as well as look in technology and politically. There's so many positive signs of a world that has become far less violent and less warlike. Again, despite what's going on right now. So overall, I have no doubt that this will lead, as I like to put it, these are the shudders, the tremors that will lead to a new birth of a messianic age of world peace, an age when we will be a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea, as Isaiah the prophet says, when there'll be no more evil and no more destruction, and we will no longer have war, and we will only have harmony among all the nations.
I mean, amen, certainly. I mean, you can't unsee the spiritual side to this. It is clearly good against evil. That's for sure. Rabbi, I wanted to thank you so much. I know my audience is going to appreciate this conversation. Thank you for showing up and taking the time. And the book is called Towards a Meaningful Life. And I guess it comes in many languages since you presented it to the president in Spanish. How many languages is it interpreted in?
14 languages, 14.
Wow. Okay. So there's one for everybody in the audience for sure. Rabbi, thank you again.
And let me share one, if I may, one final thing.
Yeah, of course.
There's also a version in Hebrew, and we've just published a special edition for the Tzahal, for the IDF, which is being distributed as we speak to all the soldiers in the military in Israel.
So beautiful. That's incredible. Thank you so much, Rabbi. It was such a privilege, such a pleasure, and an honor. Thank you.
Thank you.